The local economy performed better than was expected in the first quarter, with 8 of the 10 industries recording positive gains. Stats SA data shows that the economy grew by 4.6% in the first quarter of this year compared to the same time last year. Between January and March this year, the economy grew by 1.1% as compared to the last quarter of 2020. The mining, finance and trade sectors were the main drivers of output on the production side of the economy. The mining sector was boosted by the production of platinum group metals, iron ore, gold and chromium. Strong wholesale and retail activity underpinned growth in the trade industry. Manufacturing output was better than expected, mostly driven by strong growth in the production of motor vehicles, parts and accessories. The local economy is expected to grow by about 4.2% this year. A downside risk to output include the slow rollout of vaccines and the electricity supply constraints. Well, for more on this latest data, I'm joined by Dr. Azar Jammine. He's Chief Economist at Econometrix. Thanks very much for joining us, Dr. Jammine. What is your immediate reaction to the latest data? Are you quite pleased with it?
On the face of it, I'm very pleased with it. The figure was a bit stronger, I think, than most people had anticipated. But when one digs down into the detail, one sees that a lot of this had to do with the fact that stock levels stopped being run down. There was a bit of a replenishment of inventories, which is fine. That comes with any recovery. But more depressing is the fact that fixed capital formation or investment spending fell, whereas consumption expenditure increased quite nicely. And this is a debilitating trend that has been going on for the last 6-7 years and is counter to hopes of improving the country's longer-term economic growth potential. You cannot keep growing at a decent pace if you don't invest in your economy, in construction, in machinery, equipment, transport equipment, and buildings and the like. And that is what I think I found a little negative about this latest release.
Yeah. When you talk about an uptick in the consumption expenditure levels, where is that? Is that in the household sector, the private sector, or where is it? And are you concerned if it's in the household sector, because we know that the consumer has been under pressure?
Well, the consumer has been under pressure, but he has also saved a lot of money by not certainly during last year, spending much in the way that he had been doing previously. Consumers have been saving on transport, on rentals, on all sorts of things and on leisure activities and going on holidays that they haven't been doing as a result of COVID. And this did provide them with a little bit of leeway with which to spend a bit more. So that is understandable. But what is depressing is that there is just still so very little investment going on in the economy.
Yeah. Are there any particular sectors that you remain concerned about?
Well, obviously, the one that is taking a lot of strain at the moment is the leisure industry and hospitality sector. But more generally, I'm just concerned about investment in infrastructure. Construction activity increased very marginally. It was quite depressing. And we're seeing potholes, we're seeing lack of water facilities, we're seeing roads deteriorating. Some of our telecommunications also providing problems. And of course, the energy sector, electricity shortages left, right and center. And unless we start investing more in ramping up not only the new equipment, but also the maintenance of existing infrastructure, which used to be one of the big strengths of the South African economy, it's unlikely that after this initial recovery from the ravages of COVID-19 last year, we are going to get a return to much better growth. Last week, we had the release of rising unemployment figures. And if you want to reduce unemployment, you've got to start growing this economy at levels well in excess of 3% per year. And if you're not investing in the longer term, you're not going to get the 3% plus growth that is really needed.
So what's missing? Why are people not investing? What needs to happen for investors to invest?
There are all sorts of structural weaknesses in the economy. First and foremost, of course, corruption and state capture. People have to be confident that resources will not be siphoned off into the pockets of just a handful of individuals. Secondly, there is a lack of capacity within the government to actually implement many of these infrastructural investment projects, and that lack of capacity, as the president himself admitted at the Zondo Commission, was attributable in part to the ANC's policy, the moment it came into power, to actually adopt a policy of cadre deployment. Thirdly, the levels of education have been lagging way behind in most areas. We have seen a section of our educational system doing very well, but the majority of people are left out of that mainstream and are then able to add very little value to the economy afterwards in order to be able to earn a decent income.
Yeah.
Then you've got the whole problem of the high level of concentration of power in the hands of government, state-owned enterprises, organized labor, and big business. And so your small businesses and informal employment are left behind. And there's too much regulation in the economy as well. When it underperforms, we get more regulation rather than freeing up economic activity, which should be the way to go.
Dr. Jammine, without trying to give away your age or anything like that, we know that you've been watching the economy for many decades. And I just want to get a sense from you, given where we are now, are you an optimist or a pessimist about South Africa's future, given all these challenges? And, I've been covering the business sector for quite some time, and we have these conversations in and out. Do you get the sense that we're ever going to get out of the current bind that we're in?
Ever is a long time. And if I have to put my nail to the mast, I'd say that in the short term, in the very short term, yes, I'm optimistic. I think there's things that will improve in the next year or two. It's what worries me is thereafter for a period, unless people wake up to what is really holding back the progress in the economy. I think it's going to take a long time for South Africa to really reveal its full potential. From a very long-term point of view, I am extremely optimistic. I think this country has enormous resources, both human and material, to really grow a lot faster and for people to start living better. But there are a huge number of hang-ups on all sides that need to be cleared up before we actually get onto that growth path. And for that matter, so to put my nail to the mast from a medium-term point of view, I am, of course, concerned that we cannot lift ourselves out of a 1 to 2% growth rut, other than in the very short term, where recovery from a dreadful year last year is going to result in a reasonable growth rate this year of 4% or so.
Yeah. So let's go to the crux of the issues that you always raise, the issue of education. We know that, of course, we have a very high official unemployment rate, but a lot more people unemployed that are accounted for in the sort of informal unemployment rate. What is it that you think that we need to be doing in South Africa to change the fortunes of those people who are currently not used?
Essentially, we need to bring back and allow people with skills to transfer those skills far more readily and encourage them to do so, not discourage them from doing so in a very significant way over the next few years. And unfortunately, it's a long-term project. We also have to allow the influx of skilled people to assist us in that exercise. And that's not been happening right now.
Yeah. One of the things, of course, before COVID happened was government seemed to be quite serious about relaxing visa regulations, allowing skills to come in from elsewhere. COVID happened and, of course, travel and all of that was limited. Are you optimistic that perhaps in 2022 we're going to be able to see more skills coming in to do that very skills transfer that you're talking about?
I would love to see that happening, but I sense that there is an ideological reluctance and opposition to allowing foreigners to come in to impart their skills to us by a fairly significant section of the ruling party.
And just speaking around the whole public sector wage bill, we know that that is continuing, and the government's position has been it really can't offer that much, and the public sector unions are having none of it. And we know that this could potentially pose even more of a fiscal risk. What are your concerns in this regard? And do you think that government does have some wiggle room?
Well, government's wiggle room has increased marginally over the last few months because of the commodities price boom and the fact that the mining sector has been doing very well and making a lot of profit, and that has been helping to boost our tax take. We also find that the middle and upper income groups of society have not been as badly affected by COVID as the poorer sections of society and small business. So at least the tax revenue has not been impaired to the extent that in correlation to the number of people who have lost their jobs at the lower end of the income spectrum. So we are finding that the government finances are not quite as bad as we thought they were about 6 months ago. Nonetheless, the attempt by government to try and rectify its fiscal situation is based primarily on the premise that remuneration of public servants has to be constrained over the next few years. And if the trade unions don't play ball on this one, then I'm afraid we run the risk of ending in a debt default in a few years' time, currency plunging, inflation surging ahead. So that is the trade-off that we've got to play with. The National Treasury seems to be determined to try and keep a hold on the reins, but from a political angle, this is going to be one of the areas of huge contestation over the next few months.
Yeah, a very frightening scenario that you paint there. But now let's say, for example, that the government and the unions do have a meeting of minds and there isn't a significant increase. There is talk by the government or the Department of Social Development about the possible of a BIG, a basic income grant. How sustainable do you think that is, given that we have such high unemployment levels and a fairly thin tax base? Do you think that could be sustainable or not?
I believe that introducing a basic income grant is far too broad-based to be useful. I think that the government actually achieved quite a lot in increasing social grants to the poor and those who are unemployed during the COVID crisis. Those, unfortunately, have now expired. I would think that there could be a lot more mileage in just extending those rather than introducing an entire basic income grant. That I don't need a basic income grant. You don't need one, an additional bit of money doled out by the government. It's the poor that really need the assistance.
That's very true.
And I do believe that the government can go quite far in using this additional wiggle room that it's received in simply extending some of the grants to provide us means of survival for the really poor for an extended period of time.
Dr. Azar Jammine, always a pleasure talking to you. He's the Chief Economist at Econometrix. Health Minister